Nigeria's elections means more to Africa than most people realize. What with the West African nation accounting for 16% of the continent's population, comprising diverse ethnicities and demographics? What with the strategic geographic location on the African map? What with the vast wealth ranging from raw human resource to crude oil? What with the upsurge of violence in that country as they prepare to conduct an already postponed election? Against the backdrop of an Islamist militant group who have vowed to disrupt the election, and also looking at the other goings-on in the sub-region, one is perhaps obliged to look at the Nigerian elections beyond Nigeria. And to help us do just that is Dr. John Osae Kwapong. Dr. Osae Kwapong is Associate Vice President, Academic Affairs and Institutional Effectiveness at the University of Findlay in Ohio, USA. Thank you very much for making time with us, Dr. Kwapong.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me on your show once again.
Okay, sir, thank you so much. You are no stranger to this station at all, and we thank you for making time once again. First of all, let me ask you, in what ways is the Nigerian election likely to impact the African continent, the sub-region first, and the continent at all, if at all?
You know, if you think of the elections going one of two ways, if it goes very well in the sense that peacefully conducted, a winner is declared, both sides accept the results, no trouble, no post-election issues, tensions, then that's good news. Nigeria maintains its stability, the sub-region maintains its stability, whatever intra-relationships that happens within the region, it still keeps going on, no interruptions. If you think of all the political, economic, and social interactions that goes on within Nigeria, but also between Nigeria and its West African neighbors, as well as the rest of the region, if it goes well, then that's great. Part of the concerns that others are also having is, given all of the pre-election tensions, as well as the postponement that has happened, if it doesn't go well, then what happens?
Yeah.
Some of the things that people are actually pointing out to is, one, the economic position that Nigeria enjoys, not just within the West African region, but the rest of sub-Saharan Africa and the African region. You're talking the largest economy. I think at the last estimate, it's about a $500 billion economy. So there's concerns about that economic disruption if the elections, quote unquote, do not go well. And then there are others who are also concerned that if the elections do not go well and result in some kind of post-election fracas, violence here and there, what becomes the social implications for its neighbors? For instance, you can think of maybe something like a refugee crisis.
Yeah.
And where would those refugees troop to? And will those countries that they troop to be in a position to accommodate them? So you can see all of the ripple effects that could happen if the elections go one of two ways. If it goes well, which we are all praying and hoping that it does, then yes, social, economic, and all political issues remain stable, and generally we can continue enjoying a relatively peaceful West Africa as well as an African region.
Okay, sir.
If it doesn't go well, that becomes the other concern that others have.
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned something that I actually have on paper to ask you, and that's the postponement of the election. Most Nigerians are not taking it that well, but the armed forces have made a quite plausible excuse that the North has to be secured first. Would you rather have a slight tweak of issues, so that we have a good election where everybody is properly enfranchised, etc., and everybody is secured, rather than have, political correctness, for instance, constitutional astuteness?
The postponement of the election has raised quite a number of eyebrows, and that's because there is what I think a bit of a trust deficit as we are going into this election in Nigeria, which is a lot of people are very suspicious of the extent to which the ruling government headed by Goodluck Jonathan would go to stay in power and win this election. There's also been some questions raised about the truly independent nature of their independent National Electoral Commission. And so the announcement of the postponement of the election seemed to fuel people's suspicion that it is all part of a grand plot to make sure that Goodluck Jonathan stays in power, especially too because there are a lot of indications that the opposition actually stands a really good chance of pulling it off and winning this election. But having said that, the security concerns in the northern region is also very real, which to me says if truly that is the key issue that is driving the postponement of the election, then yes, I would rather us conduct an election in a generally peaceful environment devoid of violence. When you say that, though, others make the counter-argument that the Boko Haram threat of violence and what they've been engaging in has been known for some time now.
Yep.
And it doesn't look like a lot has been done to quell their activities. So those who are a little cynical about the move to postpone the election are, have a legitimate question to say, we haven't done much. What gives us the assurance that in the next 6 weeks, we will be able to deal effectively with this so that we can conduct this election in an environment devoid of violence? So yes, in a way, if truly it's about containing that violence and making sure that in the north, Boko Haram doesn't disrupt the election wherever they are located in the northeastern part of Nigeria, then all well and good, we might as well do that. But if there are other underlying political motives that is driving the postponement of this election, then that creates other issues,
more trust deficit, I guess.
Right, for the way we conduct elections. Because again, elections create a lot of tensions anyway.
They do.
So you don't want to do things that further fuels those tensions that elections tend to create.
That's right. So talking about leadership in general, though, let's take the Mo Ibrahim Prize for African leadership, achievement in African leadership. Let's take that as some sort of a guideline.
Yes.
For the past few years, it has failed to turn up any winners. If this is anything to go by, what kind of picture does that paint for African leadership? What kind of future does, or do Africans hope to wake up to with our own indices not providing any winners for something like the Mo Ibrahim Achievement Awards?
And when I read the news about Mo Ibrahim, will not be able to make that award again, it was very disappointing. Disappointing in the sense that you raise a very important issue. If we go by what that award has been trying to do to send a clear message that the region is making huge strides and major improvements in good governance and providing leadership to address a lot of socioeconomic problems, then the inability to award that prize to an outgoing leader, for me, is an indication that perhaps there's a lot more we'll have to do when it comes to leadership, that perhaps we may have leaders who are not truly addressing the good governance and as well as all the socioeconomic issues that we're feeling, and that perhaps we need to step up our efforts and we need to do better. Now, my very good friend, Professor Kwesi Prempeh, who raves and rants a lot about Kenya as being, a rising star, I'm hoping that perhaps when the term of the Kenyan president is over, giving all the indications of good governance going on, and how much Professor Kwesi Prempeh keeps reminding us about that maybe perhaps in the next year, 2-3 years, we would have an opportunity to see the Mo Ibrahim Award going to someone. Because again, for 2, 3, 4 years, if you can't award the prize to anyone, then again, like you said, it sends a message that we still have leadership problems.
It definitely sends a wrong signal.
Yes.
In connection with that too, last week or so, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, I'm talking Nigeria right now,
yes,
ripped his party membership card in protest, apparently, of Goodluck Jonathan's candidature. Now, Goodluck Jonathan is somebody that he groomed to that position. Let's take a few steps further west to Ghana. Jerry John Rawlings never saw eye to eye with John Mills till he died. Even in death, he still seems to have an axe to grind with someone that he, again, someone who was a protege, was his own protege. What does this mean for us? Let me add another one. Even in Nigeria, again, the presidential candidate, I beg your pardon, for the All Progressives Congress, is a one-time head of state.
Yes.
What? Don't we have young blood that can fill these spots? Why do we have to recycle politicians? And once they're out of power, what makes them think that only they hold the aces?
How do I even begin to dissect this multifaceted, complex question, right? I always say that politics also does come with some theater to it. And so when I read the story about, former president ripping in Nigeria, ripping his membership, his membership card in the, in the political party, showing publicly his break with Jonathan, Goodluck Jonathan. It's very interesting to watch. I'm sure behind the scenes there are a number of issues between the two politically, perhaps some disagreements, an eventual political falling out, and therefore, to make a public statement of his break with Goodluck Jonathan, he says, look, I'm done with you and I'm done with your party. Now, if you're an opposition party, it's politically good for you because you can seize on that as part of your electoral strategy and say, look, even the man who groomed Jonathan to be president today is making a public break with him. Then how much more the rest of us? So that was my reading into it. And like I said, I'm sure behind the scenes, there's a lot that has gone into creating this relationship between Obasanjo and former President Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan. The other issue about recycling of politicians in our region is, I'm not sure why we don't have new young blood stepping up to the plate, trying to seize the mantle of leadership from what we would traditionally call the old guard. After all, their generation, for me, have done what they could. They have their own successes, they've had their own failures, and maybe perhaps it's time for the new generation to step up and step into that space and say, we want to provide a different kind of political leadership. The issue is, sometimes when I look at the quote-unquote vicious nature that our politics can take, that it seems like a lot of people become a little hesitant to say that, I'm a young guy of 40 years, let me step up and step in. But I think, even if I use Ghana as an example, I think we are slowly beginning to realize that we have to change our trajectory. We have to start doing things differently. And maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, we would see a lot more younger generation type people stepping up into the political space to say, we are going to seize the mantle of leadership from the old guard.
Okay.
But other than that, I think for now, we'll have to deal with a lot of what you call recycle politicians.
We wait to see the day when we will have, a regurgitation of ideas rather than, a refreshment of ideas rather than a regurgitation. So now let's talk about ISIS for a second. ISIS is something that not too long ago nobody would have associated with Africa at all. We all thought ISIS was a Middle Eastern threat in which the American government and the European powers are, trying to deal with. Now, we woke up one day to beheadings in Libya, and then that followed by bombings and stuff like that. That is kind of too close for comfort. Now look at the whole geography of the area, with Nigeria further down and with an active Boko Haram who just produced a video that is increasingly looking like ISIS. And these people share a somewhat similar philosophy. Their actions are somewhat similar. Is there a real threat of ISIS presence on the African continent via Boko Haram?
It definitely is something that we have to pay attention to and have to be truly concerned about, especially after having witnessed what occurred in Libya, that it is not even so much the group itself that may create, a sort of, how do I even call it, a quote-unquote like a chapter or maybe a homegrown ISIS in, let's say, Nigeria or some other country in the region. But I think the concern that it's beginning to raise is that will there be groups that will try to emulate the kinds of actions and the kinds of philosophy and the kinds of ideas that an ISIS is propagating? So if we take Nigeria as an example, will the actions of ISIS encourage a Boko Haram, who are already engaged in quite a number of very deadly activities? Will that even encourage them would it embolden them to do more of such acts? The issue is, if truly it could begin to embolden your likes of the Boko Haram, then we have a big problem on our hand. I mean, I know there's been a lot of commentary and there's been a lot of awareness raised about the Boko Haram threat. And I know people keep wondering why, after a number of years, it appears as though that threat hasn't been able to be dealt with very effectively. And I'm not sure I personally know why or have answers to that. But at least what you and I and everybody else recognizes is that that real threat is there via the Boko Haram route.
Okay. Now, Doc, finally, it's quite unfair to drag an academic like you into anything that might be labeled conspiracy theory. So please indulge me on this one. But I've heard quite a bit of, discourse about all this being staged and being employed by the forces that be to have a certain presence in Africa. I've heard of talks of recolonizing Africa through these things, and then creating a Boko Haram, which is so terrible that it needs external intervention, would then open the gates for those forces to make a way into Africa. What's your own take on this, taking into consideration the fact that academics and conspiracy theory are two different things?
Although you'll be surprised to know that academics also tend to be very cynical a lot, But seriously though, I actually don't. It's hard for me to believe that there is such a ploy, an attempt to recolonize Africa through the Boko Haram route, where Boko Haram does enough damage that we are unable to deal with it, and therefore an external force comes in, deals with it, and then in its attempt to deal with it, it takes over the country or it takes over the entire region. I doubt very much that is the ploy, at stake. But it also does not erase the real concern that external help to deal with the threat won't be appreciated or is not welcomed. I think that if truly the Nigerian government is struggling to deal with the Boko Haram, it won't hurt, for instance, to have the African Union join in to help. It won't even hurt to have some kind of external force to come in and help the country as well. But I don't think any external help that comes in to help Nigeria would be used as an attempt to colonize Nigeria and begin a recolonization process of sub-Saharan Africa. But you never know. It's a dark world, and I could be wrong.
Thank you so very much, Dr. John Osae Kwapong. Dr. John Osae Kwapong is Associate Vice President, Academic Affairs, University of Findlay. He's also a political scientist by training and a personal friend, if that adds to anything. Thank you so very much for watching.
You're welcome, Senior Kwesi.
And keep watching Sahara TV. There's more on the flip side.
All right.